Chapter 6. Test him, Tia, Prof said. I shied back, holding my rifle nervously. Behind Prof, Megan leaned against the wall, jacket back on, handgun strapped under her arm. She spun something in her hand. The extra magazine for my rifle. She'd never returned it. Megan smiled. She'd tossed my rifle back up to me above, but I had a sinking suspicion that she'd emptied the chamber, leaving the gun unloaded. I started to panic. The redhead, Tia, approached me, holding some kind of device. It was flat and round, the size of a plate, but had a screen on one side. She pointed it at me. No reading. Blood test, Prof said, face hard. Tia nodded. Don't force us to hold you down, she said to me, removing a strap from the side of the device. It was connected to the disc by cords. This will prick you, but it won't do you any harm. What is it? I demanded. A dowser. A dowser, a device that tested if one was an epic or not. I thought those were just myths. Abraham smiled, enormous gun held beside him. He was lean and muscled and seemed very calm, as opposed to the tension displayed by Tia and even Prof. Then you won't mind, eh, my friend? He asked with his French accent. What does it matter if a mythological device pricks you? That didn't comfort me. But the Reckoners were a group of practiced assassins who killed high epics for a living. There wasn't much I could do. The woman wrapped my arm with a wide strap, a bit like what you use to measure blood pressure. Wires led from it to the device in her hand. There was a small box on the inside of the strap, and it pricked me. Tia studied the screen. He's clean for sure, she said, looking at Prof. Nothing on the blood test either. Prof nodded, seeming unsurprised. All right, son. It's time for you to answer a few questions. Think very carefully before you reply. Okay, I said as Tia removed the strap. I rubbed my arm where I'd been pricked. How, Prof said, did you find out where we were going to strike? Who told you that Fortuity was our target? Nobody told me. His expression grew dark. Beside him, Abraham raised an eyebrow and hefted his gun. No, really, I said, sweating. Okay, so I heard from some people on the street that you might be in town. We didn't tell anyone our mark, Abraham said. Even if you knew we were here, how did you know the epic we'd tried to kill? Well, I said, who else would you hit? There are thousands of epics in the city, son, Prof said. Sure, I replied, but most are beneath your notice. You target high epics, and there's only a few hundred of those in New Chicago. Among them, only a couple of dozen have a prime invincibility, and you always pick someone with a prime invincibility. However, you also wouldn't go after anyone too powerful or too influential. You figured they'd be well protected. That rules out Nightwielder, Conflux, and Firefight, pretty much Steelheart's whole inner circle. It also rules out most of the Burrow Barons. That leaves about a dozen targets, and Fortuity was the worst of the lot. All epics are murderers, but he'd killed the most innocents, by a long shot. Plus, that twisted way he played with people's entrails is exactly the sort of atrocity the Reckoners would want to stop. I looked at them, nervous, then shrugged. Like I said, nobody had to tell me. It's obvious who you'd end up picking. The small room grew silent. Ha! Said the sniper, who still stood by the doorway. Lads and ladies, I think this means we might be getting a tad predictable. What's a prime invincibility? Tia asked. Sorry, I said, realizing they wouldn't know my terms. It's what I call an epic power that renders conventional methods of assassination useless. You know, regeneration, impervious skin, precognition, self-reincarnation, that kind of thing. A high epic was someone who had one of those. I'd never heard of one who had two, fortunately. Let us pretend, Prof said, that you really did figure it out on your own. That still doesn't explain how you knew where we'd spring our trap. Fortuity always sees the plays at Spritz's place on the first Saturday of the month, I said. And he always goes to look for amusement afterward. It's the only reliable time when you'd find him alone and in a mindset where he could be baited into a trap. Prof glanced at Abraham, then at Tia. She shrugged. I don't know. I think he's telling the truth, Prof, Megan said, her arms crossed, jacket open at the front. Don't stare, I had to remind myself. Prof looked at her. Why? It makes sense, she said. If Steelheart had known who we were going to hit, he'd have had something more elaborate planned for us than one boy with a rifle. Besides, Nees here did try to help. Kind of. I helped. You'd be dead if it weren't for me. Tell her, Hardman. The Reckoners looked confused. Who? Abraham asked. Hardman, I said, pointing at the sniper by the door. My name's Cody, kid, he said, amused. Then where's Hardman? I asked. Megan told me he was up above, watching with his rifle to... I trailed off. There never was a sniper up above, I realized. At least not one specifically told to watch me. Megan had just said that to make me stay put. Abraham laughed deeply. Got caught by the old invisible sniper gag, eh? Had you kneeling there thinking you'd be shot at any moment. Is that why she calls you Knees? I blushed. All right, son, Prof said. I'm going to be nice to you and pretend none of this ever happened. Once we're out that door, I want you to count to 1,000 really slowly. Then you can leave. If you try to follow us, I'll shoot you. He waved to the others. No, wait, I said, reaching for him. The other 4 each had a gun out in a flash, all pointed at my head. I gulped, then lowered my hand. Wait, please, I said a little more timidly. I want to join you. You want to what? Tia asked. Join you, I said. That's why I came today. I didn't intend to get involved. I just wanted to apply. We don't exactly accept applications, Abraham said. Prof studied me. He was somewhat helpful, Megan said, and I will admit that he is a decent shot. Maybe we should take him on, Prof. Well, whatever else happened, I'd managed to impress her. That seemed almost as great a victory as taking down Fortuity. Eventually, Prof shook his head. We aren't recruiting, son. Sorry. We're going to leave, and I don't want to ever see you anywhere near one of our operations again. I don't even want to get a hint of you being in the same town as us. Stay in New Chicago. After today's mess, we won't be coming back here for a long while. That seemed to settle it for all of them. Megan gave me a shrug, an almost apologetic one that seemed to indicate she'd said what she had as thanks for saving her from the thugs with the Uzis. The others gathered around Prof, joining him as he walked to the door. I stood behind, feeling impotent and frustrated. You're failing, I said to them, my voice growing soft. For some reason this made Prof hesitate. He glanced back at me, most of the others already out the door. You never go for the real targets, I said bitterly. You always pick the safe ones, like Fortuity. Epics you can isolate and kill. Monsters, yes, but relatively unimportant ones. Never the real monsters, the epics who broke us and turned our nation to rubble. We do what we can, Prof said. Getting ourselves killed trying to take out an invincible epic wouldn't serve anyone. Killing men like Fortuity won't do much either, I said. There are too many of them, and if you keep picking targets like him, nobody's going to worry about you. You're only an annoyance. You can't change the world that way. We're not trying to, Prof said. We're just killing epics. What would you have us do, lad? Cody said, amused. Take on Steelheart himself. Yes, I said fervently, stepping forward. You want to change things? You want to make them afraid? He's the one to attack. Show them that nobody's above our vengeance. Prof shook his head. He continued on his way, black lab coat rustling. I made this decision years ago, son. We have to fight the battles we have a chance of winning. He walked out into the hallway. I was left alone in the small room, the flashlight they'd left behind giving a cold glow to the steel chamber. I had failed.